The city park was alive with sounds of children laughing, birds chirping, and distant traffic blending into a soft hum. It was a warm, bright morning, and people were scattered across the green lawns, enjoying the sunshine. Some jogged along the paths, others sat on benches, reading or chatting quietly. In the middle of it all, a luxury car slowly rolled into the park parking area, catching a few curious glances. Out stepped a tall man, clearly wealthy, wearing a tailored suit and polished shoes that gleamed in the sunlight. His presence seemed to command attention even without trying. His face showed impatience, a kind of sharpness that made people step aside as he passed. He walked briskly, scanning the surroundings with a careful, calculating gaze, like he was looking for something or someone to measure against his expectations. Near the center of the park, a small crowd had gathered around a fountain where children were tossing pennies and watching ripples form. Amidst them, a little girl sat on the edge of the fountain, carefully fixing a small broken toy car. Her hair was tied in a simple braid, and her clothes were neat but clearly handmade, not expensive. She focused on the tiny wheels and gears, her small fingers moving with surprising skill. Occasionally, she paused to think, biting her lip gently, before returning to her careful work. She hummed softly, lost in concentration. The billionaire, curious and a little irritated by the noise of the fountain and the crowd, wandered closer. Something about the scene caught his attention. He stopped, frowning slightly, and watched the girl for a moment. The toy car in her hands seemed ordinary, nothing impressive to him at first glance, but the care with which she handled it was unusual. He moved closer, almost unconsciously, and tried to look over her shoulder. She didn't notice him at first, completely absorbed in her task. Suddenly, the toy car's wheel came off completely, and the girl let out a small sigh. She looked around for a moment, eyes wide with worry, and muttered, "Oh no, this won't work now." The billionaire raised an eyebrow, a slight smirk forming on his face. He thought to himself, perhaps even she can't handle this simple thing. Then, something unexpected happened. The little girl glanced up and saw the man standing there, his sharp eyes watching her closely. For a brief moment, she hesitated. Most adults she had seen would have dismissed her, laughed, or told her to leave it alone. But instead, she straightened up a little, took a deep breath, and said, clear and confident, "I can repair it." The billionaire blinked, caught off guard by the boldness in her voice. He looked at her, expecting her to be shy or unsure, but she wasn't. Her gaze was steady, her expression calm yet determined. There was something in her tone that made him pause, a quiet confidence he hadn't noticed in a long time. He chuckled softly, partly in disbelief. "A little girl fixing a broken toy," he said, his voice tinged with amusement. "You think you can do that?" "I can," she replied, her eyes never leaving the tiny car. She reached for the scattered pieces, arranging them carefully. "I just need a moment." He watched her work, feeling a mix of impatience and curiosity. At first, he thought he would simply leave, uninterested in a child's attempt to fix something trivial. But something about the way she handled the pieces, the focus and care she showed, kept him rooted to the spot. He found himself leaning slightly closer, watching her small hands manipulate the tiny wheels and gears with a precision that seemed almost impossible for someone so young. Around them, the park continued its gentle rhythm. Children laughed, joggers passed by, and birds flitted from tree to tree. The billionaire noticed that no one was paying them much attention, yet he felt a strange pull to stay. The girl worked methodically, pausing occasionally to examine her progress, then adjusting a gear or wheel just so. After a few moments, she picked up a tiny screwdriver she had kept in her pocket, tightened a small screw, and the wheel snapped into place perfectly. She looked up and smiled, a little shyly, and said, "There, now it works." The billionaire felt a twinge of surprise. He hadn't expected her to succeed. He knelt slightly to see the toy car move smoothly along the fountain edge. For a moment he said nothing, caught between amusement and something else he couldn't quite name. His pride was gently challenged by this small, brave child, who had quietly fixed something he had assumed was too simple for her to handle. "Not bad," he said finally, though his tone was slightly grudging. "I didn't think you could do it." The little girl shrugged, not insulted, just matter of fact. "It wasn't hard. You just have to be careful and think about what you're doing." She handed the toy back to him, as if giving him a small lesson along with it. The billionaire held the toy, turning it over in his hands. There was something in the simplicity of the action, the quiet confidence of the child, that made him pause. He realized he had spent so much time valuing big deals, expensive things, and flashy accomplishments that he had forgotten about the power of patience, care, and humility. The girl stood up, brushing off her hands. "If you want, I can show you how to fix it next time too," she said, her tone gentle but confident. "It's not hard if you take your time." He laughed softly, a little awkwardly. "Maybe I will take you up on that," he said, still holding the toy car. For the first time in a long while, he felt a small shift inside him, an awareness that he had underestimated someone far younger and smaller than him who had something valuable to teach. The little girl smiled again, then turned to walk back to the fountain to continue helping another child with a broken toy. The billionaire watched her go, feeling an unfamiliar sense of admiration mixed with curiosity. He wondered how many other lessons he had missed in his life because he assumed he already knew everything. As he stood there, he noticed how effortlessly she moved, interacting with the other children, offering help without expecting anything in return. He thought about his own life, how he often demanded respect because of wealth, power, and status, but rarely gave it freely to those he assumed were beneath him. Something about this small, brave child made him reconsider. He realized that wisdom doesn't come from money or age, but sometimes from simple acts, courage, and kindness. And in that moment, holding the tiny toy car that she had repaired so easily, he felt the first small crack in his carefully built ego. The day continued around him, sunlight streaming through the trees, children laughing and playing, people walking their dogs, and the gentle breeze carrying the scent of flowers from the nearby gardens. Yet the billionaire felt a strange calm he hadn't felt in years, a quiet awareness that there was more to life than deals, contracts, and appearances. He glanced once more at the little girl, who was now laughing with another child, helping them fix a small wooden bird they had been trying to balance. He smiled faintly, almost to himself. It was a smile that didn't come from pride or amusement, but from a subtle recognition that he had been taught something important, and unexpectedly so. He had entered the park to escape the pressures of his own world, but instead, he found a lesson in patience, humility, and kindness from someone he never would have imagined. As he turned to leave, he kept the toy car in his hand, a small reminder that sometimes the smallest people can leave the biggest impact. He didn't know what he would do with this realization yet, but he felt certain it would change the way he approached life, even if just a little bit. And somewhere in the back of his mind, he made a quiet promise to pay attention, to look beyond appearances, and to remember that learning can come from the most unexpected places. For the little girl, it was just another day in the park, helping and playing. For the billionaire, it was the start of something new, a small, quiet awakening to a lesson he would never forget. The billionaire left the park that morning with a strange feeling he hadn't experienced in years. Normally, he would have gone back to his office or his meetings, thinking of deals, profits, and appearances. But something about the little girl's quiet confidence, the way she had repaired the toy, stayed with him. It was unusual, unsettling, and for reasons he didn't fully understand, inspiring. He tried to push the thought away as he drove back to his office, but every time he glanced at the tiny toy car in his hand, he remembered her calm smile and those simple words, "I can repair it." Meanwhile, the little girl went about her morning as if nothing unusual had happened. She helped a few more children with broken toys, gave advice on how to balance their homemade kites, and offered tips on keeping their little wooden boats from tipping over in the fountain. She had a way of explaining things simply and patiently, and the children listened. Even the older ones, who sometimes ignored younger kids, found themselves pausing and paying attention. She didn't demand respect or recognition. It was given freely because she had earned it with her actions. Back in his office, the billionaire could not focus. His mind wandered back to the park, to the little girl, to the toy car. He remembered how easily she had handled the tiny pieces, how naturally she had understood the mechanics, and how she had treated him with a mixture of respect and quiet assertiveness. He frowned at himself. How had he been so quick to dismiss her? How often had he assumed he was the smartest person in the room, only to be proven wrong by someone he underestimated? He tapped his fingers on the polished desk, thinking about how simple her lesson was, yet how deep it ran. Patience, humility, and the courage to step forward even when others doubt you. The next day, the billionaire returned to the park. He wasn't sure why he was doing it. Part of him felt curious, part of him guilty for his own arrogance, and part of him still proud, unwilling to admit fully that he had been humbled. He parked his car discreetly and walked along the paths, observing the people around him, trying to blend in. From a distance, he saw the little girl again, sitting on the grass, carefully assembling a small wooden puzzle. She looked up and noticed him, but didn't run or hide. Instead, she nodded politely, and then went back to her work. The billionaire approached slowly, his steps deliberate, not wanting to startle her or make her feel nervous. He knelt down on the grass beside her and said softly, "Good morning. Are you busy?" The little girl looked at him and shook her head. "Not really. I'm almost done." He studied her for a moment, noticing how focused she was, yet how calm she remained. There was a steadiness in her that he hadn't seen in most adults he dealt with every day. Most people rushed, pushed, or tried to impress him, but she just worked quietly, confidently, and without pretense. He cleared his throat. "Would you mind showing me how you did it yesterday? The toy, I mean." The girl tilted her head slightly, curious but cautious. "You mean the car? Sure. I can show you, but you have to promise to pay attention and do exactly what I tell you." "I'll try," he said, smiling a little at her seriousness. She handed him a small wooden toy she had been working on and began explaining, step by step, how each piece fit together. Her instructions were simple but precise. She didn't rush, didn't criticize, and didn't assume she was better than him. She explained the process patiently, stopping occasionally to check if he understood. The billionaire followed along, fumbling a little with the pieces, his large hands awkward compared to her small, skilled ones. He made mistakes, and she corrected him gently, never condescending, just guiding him with quiet confidence. As they worked, he realized that he was learning more than just how to repair a toy. He was learning about patience, focus, and the value of listening. He realized that his life had been full of noise, full of people trying to impress him, full of tasks done quickly just to meet deadlines. Here, with this little girl, everything slowed down. Every action had meaning, every step required thought, and every success felt earned. He found himself relaxing, enjoying the process in a way he hadn't allowed himself in years. Other children nearby watched curiously. Some were playing, some were wandering, but a few gathered quietly, intrigued by the unusual sight of a wealthy, serious-looking man kneeling on the grass, following the instructions of a small child. He noticed the looks but didn't care. For the first time, he realized that recognition, approval, or status weren't what mattered. What mattered was learning, understanding, and the quiet satisfaction of doing something well. By the time the toy was fully assembled, the billionaire was surprised by the feeling of pride he experienced. It wasn't pride in wealth, power, or influence. It was pride in learning, in completing something with care, and in respecting someone who had taught him something meaningful without demanding anything in return. The little girl handed the finished toy to him and said, "See? That's how it works. Sometimes, you just have to slow down and think." He nodded, feeling the weight of her words. "You're right. I forgot how to do that. I've been so busy, I didn't even notice." She smiled gently. "Most people forget, but it's okay. You can always remember again." They spent the next hour together working on different toys, repairing simple wooden puzzles, and even building a small makeshift ramp for toy cars. With each task, the billionaire felt a subtle transformation taking place. He was not just learning new skills. He was learning humility, patience, and the importance of listening. The little girl didn't lecture him. She simply guided him, letting him discover the lessons naturally. At one point, he accidentally dropped a small piece, and instead of getting frustrated, she picked it up, looked him in the eye, and said calmly, "Mistakes happen. You just try again." That simple sentence struck him more than any business meeting or speech ever had. Mistakes happen. Try again. Simple yet profound. He realized that he had spent so much of his life fearing mistakes, avoiding them at all costs, and judging others harshly when they erred. But here, he saw the beauty of patience, persistence, and the gentle guidance of someone who cared more about the process than the outcome. The sun began to dip lower in the sky, casting a warm golden glow over the park. Children were starting to leave, parents calling them for the ride home. The billionaire finally looked at his watch and realized hours had passed. He had come to the park intending to kill time, perhaps entertain a passing curiosity, but he had stayed longer than he realized, completely immersed in learning from a child. The little girl packed up her small toolkit carefully, placing everything in order. She looked at him and said, "I have to go now, but you can come back anytime if you want to learn more." He smiled, feeling a mixture of gratitude and something else he couldn't quite name. "I think I will," he said sincerely. "Thank you for teaching me." She nodded, gave him a small wave, and ran off toward her mother who was waiting nearby. He watched her go, feeling a sense of calm and clarity he hadn't known in years. The park felt different now, somehow more alive, filled with possibilities and lessons that he had never noticed before. He felt a strange warmth in his chest, a gentle reminder that learning and growth could come from the most unexpected places. As he walked back to his car, he thought about how he would approach the rest of his life. Meetings, deals, and appearances would still happen, of course, but he felt the first stirrings of a change, a willingness to listen, to slow down, and to pay attention to things he had previously overlooked. He realized that he didn't need to control everything, nor did he need to always be the smartest person in the room. There was value in learning from others, even if they were small, young, or seemed ordinary. That evening, back in his luxurious office, he placed the repaired toy car carefully on his desk. It wasn't just a toy. It was a symbol, a reminder of the morning and the lessons learned. He leaned back in his chair, looking out the window at the city lights beginning to glow. He smiled faintly, remembering the little girl's calm voice and patient hands, and for the first time in a long time, he felt a small shift within himself. A quiet, hopeful sense that change was possible, that lessons could come from the unlikeliest of teachers, and that even someone like him could still grow, learn, and become better. The next morning, he found himself thinking about her again as he prepared for his day. He wondered what she would teach him next, and for the first time he looked forward to learning, not because he needed to gain advantage or impress anyone, but because it felt meaningful. He understood, in a new way, that true lessons often come from patience, humility, and unexpected kindness. And in that understanding, he felt a quiet hope that his life could be different, that he could approach the world with a gentler heart and a more open mind. The little girl had not just repaired toys that day. She had begun to repair something within him, something he hadn't realized was broken until now. The following morning, the billionaire woke up with the thought of the little girl lingering in his mind. He poured himself a cup of coffee and sat by the window, staring at the city below, reflecting on how such a small encounter had affected him more than he would like to admit. It wasn't the toy, it wasn't the time spent, but the calm, confident way she approached challenges, the patience she showed, and the way she treated him with both respect and quiet authority. He realized that these were qualities he rarely saw in his world, and that was why her lessons felt so profound. By the time he arrived at the park, he was eager to see her again. He parked his car a little further away, wanting to appear less intimidating, and walked along the winding paths. The morning air was crisp, carrying the faint smell of fresh flowers and cut grass. Children were scattered across the park, laughing, running, and playing. Families were settling into picnics, and the city's usual hum blended with birdsong and chatter. He spotted the little girl near a bench, carefully repairing a small broken birdhouse. Her tongue peeked out slightly from the corner of her mouth in concentration, and she hummed softly as she worked. She noticed him immediately and waved, a simple, honest gesture. He smiled in return and walked toward her. "Good morning," he said, trying to sound casual. "Good morning," she replied, looking up with the same steady calm that had surprised him before. "Do you want to try something new today?" He nodded, curiosity mixed with a strange excitement. "Yes, I do." She handed him a small wooden puzzle, more complex than anything they had worked on before. The pieces were delicate, and it required careful thought and observation to fit them together. He examined it and frowned, realizing it wasn't going to be as easy as the toy car. But he remembered her instructions from the day before. Patience, focus, careful observation. He took a deep breath and started. The little girl guided him again, explaining each step slowly. He followed along, often making mistakes, but she corrected him gently, never raising her voice or showing frustration. Other children stopped to watch, curious about the unusual sight of a serious, wealthy-looking man kneeling on the grass, following the guidance of a small child. Some whispered to each other, pointing occasionally, but she ignored them, focused entirely on teaching. As he worked, he realized that it wasn't just about fixing the puzzle. It was about listening, observing, and accepting guidance. He had spent his life rushing through challenges, relying on his money, status, and intelligence to get ahead. But here, he could only succeed by paying attention, slowing down, and allowing someone else to lead. Each small success felt satisfying, and each mistake felt like an opportunity to learn, not a failure. After a while, he paused and looked at her. "Why are you so patient with everyone? You don't get frustrated or angry, even when I make mistakes." She smiled gently. "Because everyone can learn. Sometimes people just need time or guidance. You don't get better by giving up or being upset. You get better by trying again." He nodded slowly, letting the words sink in. He thought about how many times in his life he had grown frustrated when things didn't go his way, how many opportunities he had missed because he thought he already knew everything. The realization was humbling, and for the first time in a long while, he felt a twinge of humility. They worked together for hours, tackling small projects, repairing toys, assembling puzzles, and constructing tiny structures. With each task, he learned more than just the mechanics. He learned about patience, respect, observation, and the power of quiet guidance. She never demanded his attention or respect. It was earned simply by her actions and her unwavering confidence in her abilities. Around noon, a small crowd had gathered to watch them. Some parents smiled at the scene, some children cheered on, and even a few joggers slowed down to take a look. The billionaire noticed the attention but remained focused on the little girl. He realized that for the first time, recognition and admiration didn't matter to him. What mattered was understanding, learning, and experiencing the small victories alongside her. At one point, a puzzle piece didn't fit as expected, and he grew frustrated, muttering under his breath. She gently placed her hand on his and said, "Mistakes are okay, you just try again. That's how everyone learns." Her words resonated deeply. He remembered all the times he had been impatient with his employees, all the times he had dismissed people too quickly, and all the opportunities he had missed to learn something new because of his pride. He realized that patience wasn't a weakness, and guidance wasn't a threat. It was a chance to grow. By mid-afternoon, the park had quieted down a bit. Children had left, families were packing up, and the gentle breeze carried the scent of grass and flowers through the air. The billionaire and the little girl had completed several tasks, each more complex than the last. He looked at the final puzzle they had built together, a small wooden structure with interlocking pieces, and felt a sense of pride he hadn't felt in years. It wasn't the pride of wealth or achievement. It was the pride of learning, growing, and succeeding through patience and guidance. He handed her the completed puzzle and said, "I think I understand now. It's not about knowing everything. It's about learning, trying, and listening." She nodded, her eyes shining with quiet approval. "Exactly. Everyone can learn if they are willing to pay attention and not give up. Even you." The billionaire laughed softly, a genuine laugh that surprised him. He had spent so long being serious, always calculating, always in control, that he had forgotten how it felt to experience simple joy and learning. She had reminded him, without even trying, that life wasn't just about control, money, or power. It was about moments, lessons, and connections. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the park, he realized that he had been changed by the day's experiences. He felt lighter, calmer, and more aware of the world around him. He had learned patience, humility, and the quiet strength of guidance. The little girl had not only taught him how to complete puzzles or repair toys, but she had also opened a door to a way of thinking he had long ignored. Before leaving, he turned to her and said sincerely, "Thank you. I've learned more today than I have in a long time." She smiled and waved. "You're welcome. Remember, it's not just about fixing things. It's about trying, learning, and helping others along the way." He nodded, feeling the depth of her words. As he walked back to his car, he thought about the lessons he had learned and how he could apply them to his life. He realized that he didn't have to be perfect, that mistakes were part of the journey, and that true learning came from humility, observation, and respect for others. That evening, back in his office, he placed the completed puzzle on his desk alongside the repaired toy car. They weren't just objects. They were symbols of lessons learned, reminders of patience, humility, and the quiet power of guidance. He leaned back in his chair, looking out the window at the city lights, and for the first time in a long while, he felt a sense of calm satisfaction. He knew that his encounter with the little girl was not just a fleeting moment, but a turning point. A moment that would influence the way he approached his work, his relationships, and his life. As he prepared for the next day, he felt a quiet anticipation. He wondered what new lessons awaited him, what new challenges he could learn from, and how he could continue to grow. The little girl had shown him that wisdom could come from anyone, anywhere, and at any age. And with that realization, he felt a renewed sense of purpose, a desire to pay attention, to learn, and to approach the world with humility, patience, and an open heart. He knew that he had a long way to go, but for the first time, he felt ready to take that journey, guided by the simple, profound lessons of a small, confident child who had taught him more than he could have imagined. The next morning, the billionaire woke up feeling a strange mix of anticipation and nervousness. For the first time in years, he was genuinely looking forward to spending time somewhere without meetings, contracts, or deadlines hanging over him. He poured himself a cup of coffee and gazed out at the city skyline, thinking about the little girl and the lessons she had been teaching him. He realized that patience, humility, and the ability to truly listen were qualities he had rarely exercised in his life. He dressed casually, wanting to appear less intimidating, and made his way to the park. When he arrived, he saw the little girl near a large sandbox, helping a group of children build a miniature castle. She was laughing softly, encouraging them, guiding them, and patiently explaining how each piece fit together. Her focus and calm energy created an almost magical atmosphere around her. The billionaire approached quietly, not wanting to interrupt, but she looked up and smiled warmly at him, waving him over. "Good morning," she said. "I have something new for us today if you want to try." "Good morning," he replied, returning her smile. "I'd love to." She handed him a small wooden bridge they could assemble over the sandbox. It was more complex than anything they had done before, requiring careful planning and teamwork. "We need to build it together," she explained. "Each part has to fit just right, or the bridge won't hold." He nodded, feeling a little intimidated but excited. They began the task together, placing pieces carefully, adjusting angles, and sometimes redoing steps to make everything fit perfectly. The billionaire noticed that she didn't just teach him how to do things. She taught him how to think, how to observe, and how to consider the consequences of each action. Every adjustment, every placement had a purpose, and she explained why each step mattered. Other children watched curiously, some offering small suggestions, and she included them, making sure everyone felt involved. The billionaire found himself listening closely to her instructions and to the children, something he rarely did in his adult life. He realized that his world had been so focused on control and power that he often overlooked the value of collaboration and shared effort. As they worked, the billionaire made a mistake. A section of the bridge didn't align correctly, and he felt the familiar itch of frustration rising. Before he could speak, the little girl gently placed her hand on his arm and said, "It's okay. Mistakes happen. The important part is to fix them and try again." Her words struck him deeply. He remembered the countless times he had been impatient with employees, colleagues, and even friends when things didn't go his way. He realized that mistakes were not failures but opportunities to learn, and that guided encouragement could make a bigger difference than criticism or anger. They continued building the bridge piece by piece. The billionaire noticed that he was slowing down, paying closer attention, and thinking more carefully about each move. He felt a strange sense of calm, a feeling he hadn't experienced in years. The little girl's patience and guidance were teaching him more than just how to build a bridge. They were teaching him how to approach life with thoughtfulness and care. As the bridge took shape, she shared small stories from her life, explaining how she learned to fix things by observing her parents and by being curious. She spoke simply with honesty and warmth, and he listened intently. He realized that he had been missing out on so many lessons in life because he had assumed he already knew everything, and he felt a pang of regret. The children around them were now fully engaged, helping with smaller tasks and learning from the little girl's gentle instructions. The billionaire watched them, amazed at her ability to guide and inspire without ever raising her voice or demanding attention. He thought about how he had often used fear and authority to get results, and he understood that true influence came from kindness, patience, and respect. Hours passed as they worked on the bridge, adjusting pieces and solving small problems together. At one point, the billionaire hesitated, unsure how to fix a particularly tricky section. She knelt beside him, pointing out a solution with quiet confidence. "Try it this way," she said. "Sometimes, looking at things differently makes all the difference." He followed her guidance and, to his surprise, it worked perfectly. A wave of satisfaction washed over him, not because he had succeeded alone, but because he had succeeded with her help and guidance. He realized that collaboration, humility, and openness to learning could produce results far better than relying solely on his own knowledge or power. When the bridge was finally complete, it stood sturdy and balanced over the sandbox. Children clapped, laughing and celebrating their accomplishment. The billionaire smiled, feeling a sense of joy and fulfillment he hadn't known in a long time. He looked at the little girl and said, "I can see now. It's not just about fixing things. It's about understanding, working together, and learning from each other." She nodded, her eyes shining with quiet satisfaction. "Exactly. Every problem has a solution if you take the time to think, listen, and try again. And sometimes, helping others helps you understand even more." He reflected on her words, realizing that they applied not only to toys and puzzles but to his own life. He had been so focused on success, wealth, and control that he had ignored the simple truths of learning, humility, and cooperation. The little girl's guidance was teaching him how to approach challenges differently, with patience, observation, and respect. As the sun began to set, casting warm orange and pink hues across the park, the billionaire felt a profound sense of gratitude. He had learned more about himself and life in a few hours with this small child than he had in years of business meetings and negotiations. He realized that true wisdom often came from unexpected places, and that age, wealth, and status were not measures of one's ability to teach or inspire. The little girl packed up the tools and pieces, organizing them neatly. She looked at him and said, "You can come back anytime if you want to learn more. There's always something new to discover." He smiled, feeling a deep sense of respect and appreciation. "I think I will," he replied sincerely. "You've taught me more than you can imagine." She waved and ran off to join the other children, her laughter light and carefree. The billionaire watched her go, feeling a warmth in his chest he hadn't felt in years. He realized that he had been changed by her presence, her guidance, and her lessons. For the first time, he understood that true learning was about humility, patience, and the willingness to be guided, and that even the smallest people could leave the biggest impact. Walking back to his car, he thought about how he could apply these lessons to his own life. He knew that business and wealth would always be part of his world, but now he understood the value of slowing down, listening, and respecting the insights of others. He felt a quiet determination to approach his life differently, to be more patient, more humble, and more open to learning from unexpected sources. Back at his office, he placed the completed bridge and the repaired toys on his desk. They weren't just objects. They were symbols of the lessons he had learned, reminders that growth, understanding, and humility could come from anyone, anywhere, and at any age. He leaned back in his chair, reflecting on the day, and felt a sense of calm satisfaction and hope. He knew that his journey of learning was far from over, but for the first time, he felt ready to continue, guided by the simple, powerful lessons of a small, confident child who had taught him more than he ever imagined possible. That night, as he prepared for bed, he thought about the little girl's smile, her calm voice, and the way she had guided him through challenges. He realized that the most important lessons in life were often the simplest, and that true wisdom came from listening, observing, and valuing the contributions of others, no matter their age or status. And with that understanding, he drifted off to sleep, feeling a quiet hope and anticipation for the next day, ready to learn, grow, and continue being inspired by someone who had shown him that even the smallest people could teach the biggest lessons. The following morning, the billionaire woke with a sense of excitement he had not felt in years. He dressed quickly, eager to return to the park, thinking about what he might learn today. Over the past few days, the little girl had taught him lessons that went far beyond toys, puzzles, or bridges. He had learned patience, humility, the value of listening, and the importance of learning from anyone, regardless of age or status. He felt a deep curiosity about what she might show him next. Arriving at the park, he saw the little girl standing near a small wooden stand she had set up, filled with various simple tools, craft pieces, and tiny objects waiting to be repaired or assembled. A small group of children surrounded her, eagerly watching and waiting for their turn. She looked up and smiled when she saw him, waving him over. "Good morning," she said. "I have something special today. Are you ready?" "I'm ready," he replied, feeling a mixture of excitement and anticipation. She handed him a small, incomplete wooden birdhouse. "This one is a little tricky. It needs care and you need to think ahead. But I think you can do it." He nodded, feeling a spark of determination. As they worked together, she guided him step by step, explaining each movement, how each piece fit and why it mattered. He realized that it was no longer just about completing the task. It was about paying attention, being patient, and understanding the process. He made mistakes along the way, but instead of feeling frustrated, he remembered her lessons and tried again, each time improving and learning. Other children gathered around, watching the unusual scene of a wealthy, serious-looking man kneeling on the grass, listening intently to a small child's guidance. Some of them whispered to each other, amazed by the scene. The little girl continued to explain patiently, including them in the process and encouraging them to try their hand at small tasks. The billionaire noticed how she inspired others effortlessly, without demanding attention or recognition. Her influence came purely from her actions, patience, and confidence. Hours passed as they worked together. The birdhouse slowly took shape, each piece fitting neatly into place. During the process, the little girl shared small stories about learning, observing, and helping others. She explained how she had learned to repair things by watching people around her and by practicing on her own. The billionaire listened closely, absorbing not just the instructions but the underlying lessons. He thought about his life, how often he had relied on authority, wealth, or status to get things done, and how little he had practiced patience, humility, and true collaboration. At one point, the billionaire grew frustrated when a piece didn't fit as expected. He muttered under his breath, and the little girl gently placed her hand on his arm. "Mistakes are part of learning. You just try again. That's how everyone improves." Her words struck him deeply, He thought about all the times he had been impatient, critical, or dismissive of others' efforts. He realized that the value of learning came from trying, making mistakes, and being open to guidance. He took a deep breath, focused, and carefully adjusted the piece. To his satisfaction, it fit perfectly. A sense of accomplishment washed over him, not from succeeding alone, but from working together, listening, and learning. As the sun climbed higher, they continued working, repairing toys, assembling small projects, and sharing quiet moments of laughter and conversation. The billionaire noticed how calm and focused he felt, how much he was enjoying the act of learning without pressure, without judgment. The little girl had shown him that growth and understanding came not from speed or authority, but from care, patience, and openness. During a break, he sat on a nearby bench, watching her guide the children. They listened intently, followed her instructions, and celebrated small successes with smiles and laughter. He realized that her guidance had transformed more than just him. It had inspired others as well. He reflected on the lessons he had learned: humility, patience, the value of collaboration, and the importance of seeing potential in everyone. She came over and handed him a small wooden puzzle, a final challenge for the day. "This one is for you. If you can complete it, you'll see how much you've learned." He smiled, feeling a quiet determination. He worked carefully, remembering all her teachings, to observe, to listen, to try again when he made mistakes, and to remain patient. Piece by piece, he completed the puzzle, finally placing the last piece in its place. A wave of satisfaction and pride filled him, not because he had succeeded, but because he had learned and grown through the process. The little girl clapped lightly and said, "See, you've done it. You've learned more than you think. Remember, it's not just about finishing. It's about understanding and trying your best." He nodded, feeling a deep gratitude. "I understand now. Thank you. I've learned more than I ever expected." She smiled softly, a quiet but powerful expression of approval. "You're welcome. Learning never stops. Keep noticing, keep trying, and keep helping others when you can." As the day drew to a close, the billionaire watched her interact with the other children, guiding them, teaching them, and inspiring them without demanding anything in return. He realized that the lessons he had learned went far beyond toys and puzzles. They were lessons about life, about humility, patience, respect, and the quiet power of guidance and kindness. He walked back to his car, reflecting on the transformation he felt within himself. For years he had valued wealth, status, and control, but now he understood the importance of slowing down, observing, listening, and learning from anyone, regardless of age or experience. The little girl had shown him that true strength and wisdom came not from money or power, but from patience, humility, and the willingness to learn. Back at his office, he placed the completed puzzle, the repaired toys, and the bridge from the park on his desk. They weren't just objects. They were symbols of the lessons he had learned, reminders of the transformation he had begun. He leaned back in his chair, feeling a sense of calm satisfaction and hope. He knew that his life would never be the same, that he had begun a journey of growth that would continue long after that day. That evening, as he prepared for bed, he thought about the little girl's smile, her gentle voice, and the quiet confidence she had shown. He realized that she had not just repaired toys or built bridges. She had repaired something within him, teaching him lessons about life, humility, patience, and the value of learning from others. He felt a profound gratitude and a quiet determination to apply these lessons in his own world, in his work, and in his relationships. As he drifted off to sleep, he felt a renewed sense of purpose and anticipation. He knew that true learning and growth were ongoing journeys, and he was eager to continue, guided by the simple, powerful lessons of a small, confident child who had taught him more than he ever imagined possible. The experience had changed him, inspired him, and reminded him that even the smallest people can leave the biggest impact. And with that thought, he fell into a deep, peaceful sleep, ready to face the world with a gentler heart, an open mind, and a willingness to learn, grow, and help others along the way.